September 10th, 2025. A calm morning in Orem, Utah. Students filled lecture halls, professors prepared their classes, and excitement buzzed through the campus of Utah Valley University. That evening, thousands of people would gather for a highly publicized event. Charlie Kirk, the founder of Turning Point USA, was scheduled to speak as part of his American Comeback Tour. For many, it was just another stop on the conservative firebrand's nationwide tour. But for others, it would become the day the campus and the country would never forget. Charlie Kirk had built his reputation as one of the most outspoken young voices in American politics. At just 31 years old, he commanded massive audiences, clashed with critics, and built a movement that placed him squarely in the spotlight. His speeches often stirred controversy, but they also drew large crowds of supporters. At Utah Valley University, anticipation was high. Nearly 3,000 people packed into the venue. The night felt electric, charged with the energy of debate, conviction, and the draw of a national figure. As the crowd settled, the program began. Kirk walked onto the stage, greeted by cheers, applause, and the flashing lights of cell phones. He adjusted the microphone, flashed a smile, and launched into his remarks. For almost an hour, he spoke to the crowd, addressing issues of faith, politics, and the future of America. Then, as was customary at his events, he opened the floor for a Q&A session. Hands shot up across the auditorium. Questions ranged from economics to education to crime in America. And then came the question that would linger in everyone's memory. A student stepped up to the microphone and asked about the epidemic of mass shootings in America. The crowd went silent, waiting for Kirk's response. He began speaking, carefully choosing his words, acknowledging the gravity of the issue. The room was focused, the air heavy with tension. And then, in an instant, everything changed. At exactly 9:22 p.m., a single rifle shot cracked through the night. The sound echoed across the venue, a sharp, alien noise that cut through Kirk's words and silenced the crowd. At first, some thought it was a balloon popping or perhaps an equipment malfunction. But then screams erupted. People ducked. Panic exploded across the audience. On stage, Charlie Kirk staggered. The bullet had struck him in the neck. Chaos swallowed the hall. Supporters screamed and scrambled for the exits. Chairs overturned, cell phones clattered to the floor, and security rushed the stage. Officers on site yelled for people to get down, to take cover, to move quickly but safely. Outside, more officers were already converging. Within minutes, the entire campus was in lockdown. Investigators would later confirm that the shot had come from the rooftop of the Losey Center, roughly 140 yards away from the stage. The shooter had chosen his position carefully, overlooking the crowd and Kirk himself. One bullet was all it took to shatter the night and claim a life. As emergency responders fought to save Kirk, the scene around the university descended into mayhem. Families and students ran across parking lots, some sobbing, some calling loved ones, others crouched behind vehicles unsure if more shots would follow. Helicopters circled overhead. Sirens wailed. The neon lights of the university flickered against the backdrop of a city that suddenly felt under siege. Despite frantic efforts, Charlie Kirk was pronounced dead that night. The nation woke up to the news the next morning. One of the most recognizable young conservative figures in America had been assassinated during a public event. Shock waves rippled through political circles, college campuses, and homes across the country. Law enforcement wasted no time. The FBI, ATF, local police, and federal prosecutors all joined forces in what would become one of the most urgent manhunts in recent memory. Thousands of tips flooded in. Surveillance footage was pulled. Witness accounts were recorded. For days, the question loomed: who pulled the trigger and why? The answer came sooner than many expected. Within 72 hours, authorities announced the arrest of a suspect, a 22-year-old man named Tyler Robinson. Robinson was captured after a massive investigation traced his movements before and after the shooting. Evidence recovered included the rifle used in the attack, ballistic matches to the bullet, and encrypted devices suggesting premeditation. For investigators, it was a breakthrough. For the nation, it was another gut punch. Who was Tyler Robinson, and what drove him to this act of political violence? As the story unfolded, new details emerged. Robinson had allegedly scoped out the event days in advance, identifying rooftops and potential vantage points. He carried the weapon into position, prepared himself, and waited for his moment. The investigation revealed that he may have acted alone, but questions lingered about whether he was influenced, radicalized, or connected to larger groups. His motives as of now remain murky. Was this a targeted assassination meant to silence a political voice? Or was it an act of personal rage cloaked in politics? The answers remain elusive. Meanwhile, the political fallout was immediate. Leaders across the spectrum condemned the attack. President Joe Biden called it a devastating blow to democracy, warning against political violence. Conservative figures called for stronger protections at public events. Critics pointed to the growing danger of polarization, where words escalate into threats and threats into bullets. For college campuses, the shooting raised urgent questions about security, free speech, and whether America could protect its most basic democratic traditions. At Utah Valley University, classes were suspended. Memorials sprang up across the quad, with candles, flowers, and handwritten notes left by grieving students. Vigils were held, prayers offered, and tears shed. For the young people who witnessed the tragedy firsthand, the memory of that night would never fade. Some spoke about the chaos, describing how they thought they would never make it out alive. Others remembered the eerie silence after the shot, the moment when time seemed to stop before panic took over. Survivors of the event said it felt like history unfolding in front of their eyes, a history no one wanted to be part of. The legacy of Charlie Kirk, love him or hate him, will now forever be tied to that night in Utah. To his supporters, he was a fearless advocate for conservative values, a man who built a movement from scratch, inspired millions of young people, and stood unapologetically for his beliefs. To his critics, he was a provocateur, a divisive voice in a divided nation. But even those critics acknowledged that his murder marked a dark and dangerous escalation in American politics. As investigators continue to piece together Tyler Robinson's motives, the country has been left to wrestle with larger questions. How did a young man radicalize to the point of assassination? How did security fail to anticipate a rooftop sniper? And what does this say about the safety of public discourse in a nation already boiling with tension? In the days following Kirk's death, law enforcement agencies nationwide increased security for public figures. Universities revisited their event protocols. Politicians debated gun laws, free speech, and the role of social media in fueling violence. The case became a mirror, reflecting America's struggles with polarization, extremism, and the fragility of public safety. For those who were there on September 10, 2025, the scars are permanent. Students who ran for their lives, families who watched chaos unfold on live streams, and officers who rushed headfirst into danger, they will never forget the night Los Angeles wasn't the battlefield, nor Chicago, nor Washington. It was Utah Valley University, a place of learning turned into a scene of horror. As the sun sets over the quiet campus today, the events of that night remain etched into history. The stage where Kirk stood is now a symbol. The rooftop from which the shot was fired is now a reminder. And the memory of that single bullet carries lessons America cannot afford to ignore. Charlie Kirk's life ended in less than a second, but the questions his death left behind will echo for decades. Was it preventable? Was it the inevitable result of a nation tearing itself apart? Or was it the act of one lost young man whose decision changed history? What is certain is that on September 10, 2025, democracy was tested in blood. A rally meant to inspire became a tragedy that shook the nation. The crowd that came for answers left with grief, and the country was reminded, yet again, that words matter, actions matter, and violence leaves scars that never heal. Charlie Kirk, 1993 to 2025. A life ended on stage, a tragedy that America will never forget.